Hello humans. Hello humans. Let me get that there. Okay. Um, Constraints. We're in a period of the woo frothing up. It's getting speedy out there in terms of the acceleration of events. I know this because there's data sets from going all the way back to like 1997 in which we've got elements that are now popping up. As an instance, there's now reports of U.S. military personnel basically being fired and abandoned in foreign nations, in overseas. And this was in our data sets, and how in that set it was saying, and I think this goes all the way back to like 2003, maybe 2004. We started getting data that said that the American people would take up a collection, right? Basically a GoFundMe to get American soldiers back home after the fucktard American government abandons them, right? And so that's happening now. The reason that that is pertinent is because it's in a very key set. So I used set theoretic mathematics in my analysis of all of this data. In that structured mathematics, there are all different kinds of sets, weighted, aggluterated, separated, all different kinds of sets, right? And but there's a concept in there of, geez, how do I get this across? All right, so in there are you could say central sets or second layer sets or third layer sets, depending on how you wanted to look at it. But if we had a group of things that were all clustered into a set, we might find that there were some of these guys that had others organized around them if we organized our set differently, and we would find that the same kind of pattern might be there reversed in a couple of instances and may have a variant in another instance, and that we could isolate these guys into their own set and because they were like marked, so these might be the temporal markers for the individual groups here, which are in a larger set themselves, right? This is the fuzzy inclusive side of set theoretic mathematics. All right, so within this, we can then also say that these guys form a large set on their own, and that these two are also setitized or isolated, and that this one here, in its own way, is perhaps a unique in that sense, but also representative, typical, that sort of thing, right? And so within this system of set theoretic mathematics and the fuzzy set logic, you get to a point where you can weight these quantitatively. You can apply numeric values to them, right? All different kinds of numeric values can be applied to these individually, and their relationships to each other then show up in a mathematic relationship. And you can actually use digits, you know, in multiplication and all this kind of stuff to mess about with the sets and analyze them and determine things. Okay, so that aside, so in the data sets, there were components, there were characteristics, there were aspects and attributes. One of the attributes of data was when it came in, right? So if we had a set that started in 2003 and continued adding data till 2015, it's likely to be a very powerful data set when it shows up here in 2021. Because it just added data for so long. We can also say that the data as it was added had a point of inception, and thus would have an accumulation value, right? That accumulation value would be greater on data sets that originated in 2013 and less on data sets that originated in 2015. These values would be a very key way to rate fuzzy sets over the passage of time. All right, so all of that said, we have here a uniqueness, which was this particular set in which there were little elements that are now showing up, and these elements are small, discrete, able to be concisely explained. You know, U.S. soldiers abandoned overseas need to raise funds from the homeland in order to get them home, right? So you can bullet point that. And now that's showing up. We're now getting that language all mishmashed around in all this other shit, but it is nonetheless there. So this set is activating in that particular instant, right? And so that gives us greater confidence in all of the other nuclei of this particular unique leading data set with a great level of both initiation and accumulative value. Thus, all of the rest of this crap has a big, high potential for showing up, especially those things that are directly linked or indirectly linked by a particular layer of status. Now, we're actually showing up stuff that's happening in this particular layer, so to speak. All right, so that being said, that's why we're discussing this morning. It's because the woo is getting frothy, because a lot of this material is showing up and popping up relative to these data sets that go back with long accumulation value parameters. That's important, okay, because that to a certain extent describes propagation out into the future and impact over that course of that propagation, which is not necessarily the same. So you can have something propagate way out into the future and have very little impact, or have a huge impact when it gets there. So for instance, we have the JFK assassination documents, the knowledge, the report, the Warren Commission report, all of that kind of crap, right? Originating from the 1963, the JFK. If we looked at it at an emotional level, there was all these kind of hiccups and stuff, but it's basically flatlined. And then at some point in our future, it has not yet occurred, at some point in our future here, you know, at some unknown date, it will have an impact. But the goal of the power elite, the goal of the fuckers that killed Kennedy, the deep state, the goal of the deep state was to push it so far out into the future that it had basically, it was a nothing burger when it was released. Or when it will be released, okay? But they run into some interesting issues here that they're now starting to wrestle with. And that is that you can't guarantee that that effect will occur based on how far you push it out. So there might be a particular generation where that would occur, where you could release it and no one would really give a shit because of other things going on, the nature of that generation, etc. Then there's other generations where you could do that, 15 years later, and you'd have a huge upwelling of stuff. So like right now, if they actually released information that led us in any way, shape, or form to anything close to an actual description of what the fuck went down, you can bet your ass that there would be Zoomers all over to hell and gone that would start a cult of personality around Kennedy, resurrecting all of this stuff, the Camelot, all of that, and they would go after the deep state just because that knowledge came out this year under these circumstances. Okay, so by the way, I'm constrained by time. I'm going to have to do a couple of these short videos. I'm working with some people, and we've got 3 experiments running, and I'm making bread. So it's a busy day. All right, so we're in this period where we're getting frothy woo going, and the froth is coming on up to alter or to match the predictions made by the old Alta reports and how they're suggesting that we shall proceed. Okay, so every time I get one of these temporal markers that shows up out of the old reports, I can go back and map it to a set, and then I can look at the particular sets that were encapsulated in there, in their aspect and attribute subsets, and get a basic description of what's going to potentially could arise in this relativistic sense. And so it is not unexpected to see smallpox and other diseases arise now because of the threats from the powers that be in terms of trying to put us down, keep us down, all of that kind of crap, right? Because they're fighting for their lives. They're fighting to maintain control, because if they lose control, they lose everything. Many of them will. That will be quite factual and actual. Anyway, so when they, in the older Alta reports, we have description sets of natural healing, natural cures, herbalism at a very sophisticated level, like mechanical level, like biomolecular level of matching herbs, minerals, that kind of thing to human conditions will arise from within the United States as a result of all this assault by Big Pharma. So we've had it with Big Pharma. I could go into when it occurred, really started in the 1920s with the formation of all these medical associations that were all funded out of England, out of the City of London, by the way. We can get into that later. Anyway, though, so we're about done with this 100+ years of dominance and of growing dominance and then ultimate dominance by Big Pharma, and we're going to pitch them, we're going to chuck them. We're in the process of doing that now. And we're going to go to this biomolecular understanding of what's in plants and herbs and so on, really get into it, and then how to match it to the human body in order to make very, very, very effective medicines and treatments and stuff over the course of time. This is a big set that we've got that is related to the current language now showing up both about the soldiers being trapped overseas as well as the smallpox, the threats, okay, the threats by the powers that be to release smallpox on all of us. So the point of this particular video here is to say that it's going to get very frothy. If you look at the old reports, you'll see all kinds of language showing up. It may not match 100% because of the changes in linguistics over time in terms of how it's expressed within our censored environment. So basically, you're not seeing any of the stuff about soldiers being trapped in the mainstream news because that makes the Brandon regime look bad. So you're going to have to hunt, but you'll find it out there. All right. So the smallpox. It appears that anybody that's on the chaga routine is already taking a very powerful prophylactic against smallpox. And here's how this thing stacks up. Let me take just a minute and go over here and get this up here so I can get exact numbers. And there we are. Okay. Okay, so smallpox, I can find no references in any way, shape, or form in Russian literature that identify smallpox outbreaks in particular regions of Siberia where there's a lot of these, a lot of chaga consumption. There are articles in even the Daily Mail and all these other British publications and stuff that even as recent as 2015 that say that chaga has effectiveness against smallpox. If you go and look statistically, the tribes that are all around these particular regions in Siberia where there's a lot of chaga and they consume it all the time, they don't have, there's never any reports in any of the Russian literature that says that there was a smallpox outbreak in this area, where there were smallpox outbreaks all through the area in people that were not associated with those tribes. We can't really see it here because of the way that this is laid out at the moment, but over here in Russia, across in that region, you'd always get the travel from northern China heading over to basically to Moscow and then into Europe, right? Just because of the lay of the mountains and so on, there was these natural paths in terms of traffic. And so it's been going on for centuries. And we've seen lots of reports of smallpox in China and smallpox throughout Mongolia and all of these areas. But the northern regions that are just to the north of them, where these Siberian tribes live that consume chaga all the time, they don't have any report of it at all. Then, okay, so there's that. So historically, we've got that there's actually a correlation historically with these people in that region of not ever really encountering any disease as a result of smallpox. And they may have indeed countered smallpox because they are herds people, and they're continually dealing with herd animals. True, it's not cows, but nonetheless, you know, they milk them and so on and so on. But there's also no sign of cowpox, even in those ones that do herd cows, which are these groups are further over to the west, closer towards Moscow. They don't use basically deer so much, or reindeer. Anyway, so there's that. If you go and research chaga and go and look at the various names you can find for smallpox, you'll find many associations for chaga being used over history against diseases labeled as smallpox. Many of these diseases may not have been smallpox. But nonetheless, we find that smallpox, being a virus, in this sense of and being attacked or supported, the body supported by chaga, appears to be so basically, if you're using the chaga, you may indeed be less susceptible to threats of smallpox. In our data sets around the sun disease and that kind of thing, as we moved into SciFi World, there was this stuff in there about the emergence of do-it-yourself biology, do-it-yourself, cloning, all of this kind of crap. A lot of it emerging out of China or Asia in general, but also in North America as part of the biomolecular herbalism, or whatever we want to call it, this very sophisticated new way of medicine, or obtaining medicines. In those sets, we had sets of threats of very strong diseases that never materialized. So in other words, there were sets that included language about smallpox and all this other crap, Ebola and that sort of thing. And they just kind of like, they were nothing burgers within the maturing data sets. They never gained volume, they never gained impact or duration or anything, and they were all showing as sort of like petering out, not even being discussed or concerned anymore around 2025. So that's very encouraging, especially now that we're into these fuzzy sets, and these fuzzies into these sets that are associated with the soldiers, and that the fuzzy logic in set theoretic mathematics has those associated with the leads for the disease, lead sets for the disease. So we're in this period of time where they will indeed be threatening. We should be aware that they may try it, but in general, it doesn't appear that sort of stuff is in our near-term future, that won't be showing up. Now, I got to get moving, but on the other side of that, within these sets, there is this very large, and it grows dominating over time, interaction with UFOs, basically. We can just call it that, right? Whatever the hell, however it develops. Whether we own them, create them, whether they came from the Nazis or whether they're space aliens, who the hell knows? But within those data sets that are associated with this particular temporal marker, which is a very key, very sharp temporal marker, very unique, we got some UFO crap. So anyway, so this is frothy woo. We're getting into the UFO crap. Don't worry too much about the smallpox. Take your chaga, take your vitamins. The idea for all of these diseases is that you should, it wants to find weak people, targets of opportunity. If your body is hardened in optimal vitamins and you take the chaga as a regulating thing. Oh, this is what I was going to say real quick. All right, so the reason that chaga is so powerful here is that we have this thing called an ORAC value, right? ORAC, which is the oxygen radical absorbance capacity. This is what deals with free radicals. This is what deals with inflammation and all of the negatives that are associated with just being alive and getting hit by all these radiations and stuff, is how high in ORAC value your foods are. And so like blueberries are at 24.5, right? I'm reading all of this off of alaskachaga.com. Wild blueberries in the lower 48 states are at 61 ORAC. Alaska blueberries, Alaska blueberries are at 76. I'll skip the rest here real quick. But chaga, chaga mushroom is at 36,557. So imagine how many blueberries you would have to consume to get even close to that. You'd be just a giant walking blueberry yourself. But you see the point of it, right? That there are these substances that we locate over time as humans that they couldn't probably have. No one in Siberia could tell you this. No one in the Indian tribes that use this, where they didn't get smallpox, when other Indian tribes not using chaga did get smallpox, could have told you that the ORAC value was this disproportionately high to anything we think of as a good antioxidant. But humans found it, off we go. So universe provides, universe guides, and I got to go to experiment number 1.